we want to be able to offer multiple genres and formats of video games so that everybody kind of feels that they have a space to connect to. And I think that's the biggest thing that educators and coaches miss is the mental state and that performance mindset within video games was important. Don't be shy or scared because you don't think that your technical ability or your understanding of video games is good enough. I'd like to see kids have success and more confidence in themselves,
Well,
build on their self-esteem through esports.
hey yo, what it do? What it do? It's your boy Q, and welcome on in for another episode of Lotus 8's podcast, Mind, Body, and Gaming. I hope everyone has been enjoying their summer and staying cool. For those of y'all who don't know me, well, what up? Very nice to meet y'all. I am our caster, host, and content creator over here with Lotus 8. I'll be hanging out with you guys every couple of weeks, and I'm excited to get down to it. I was thinking about it the other day, and I know at least as far as for my boy, only has like 4 weeks until he's back in school. It seems like summer just flew by in the blink of an eye. I mean, it feels like just yesterday we were hanging with the Lotus 8 crew for the Canadian Esports Championship there in Winnipeg, and at this point, it's 2 months ago. It's kind of wild to think about, but of course, that weekend didn't just hang out up there for CECS. I also got to hang out with today's guest during the Scholastic Esports Expo. Anybody who knows me knows how much I love the Scholastic Esports scene. So I'm super excited to dig in a bit today with the chair of the Manitoba School Esports Association, Karl. Karl, how are you feeling today, boss?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So now, Karl, I know that I've kind of come to see generally as far as within the space, people who work and especially like the scholastic esports space have some sort of background in gaming, whether it's like competing, just casually gaming. So what does gaming mean to you as far as in your pastime?
I've been a lifelong gamer. I've been gaming since I was a kid, and a lot of my most memorable childhood memories and moments stemmed from gaming. One of my favorite games as a kid was Zelda 2. It was one of the few games that we owned on a Nintendo, the original Nintendo console, and we got stuck at this place where we had to find a white cross. And my brother and I just like we tried everything, it wasn't working. We pleaded and begged with our parents to call Nintendo Power Hotline. That was the only kind of outlet that where you could find or listen to information and get information. The internet wasn't around or had just been starting, and we of course couldn't afford that. So my parents caved, and it was like $1 US a minute. It was very expensive, and we got the tip or whatever. It didn't work. It turned out a few months later what happened, the newspaper lady came over to collect for the Winnipeg Free Press, and she was like, "Hey, what game are you guys playing?" And we're like, "Zelda
Oh,
2." And she's like, "Oh yeah, me and my husband just beat that." Well, it's like here's a female adult. We didn't think adults even play video games, never mind a female, telling us that she beat the very game that we've been trying for like over the past year and a half, and tried everything, couldn't beat it. So she dropped her collection bag, sat down with us, and told us where the White Cross was. So
so
it was pretty amazing.
would you say that Zelda 2 is probably like your favorite game title like of all time, or is there one that over the years has kind of been able to surpass that as far as like I guess feeling for you?
Well, like all Zelda games they progressively have become better, and they're amazing. Tears of the Kingdom was fantastic, but it just yeah, that game was very different because it was like a 2D side scroller, very
Right.
different than the other Zelda games that had come out. And that was just one of the games that we had that we owned. And my parents were like, "You got to beat the game till we buy you a new one." That was their plea, and it worked for almost 2 years. They didn't have to buy us another game. So, but yeah, definitely that's this genre. And yeah, I think as kids, like now we in esports, we try to build team games and get
Right.
kids to understand like, hey, there's collaboration, cooperation, communication, all those C's that are involved in esports. But that game was single player. But my brother and I figured out a way to tag team it. Like that was until then we fought like cats and dogs who's going to play, right? But until the time where we needed each other, then we started to like share and try to figure things out and play together on a single player game. So it was kind of cool.
I'm sure that's also helped be able to build some long-lasting memories as well. That's really cool. Now, I know at least here in the States, I've noticed that a lot of the esports programs, whether it's the state here in Pennsylvania that I work with a lot, but especially like at the high school level, it feels like they're still very much like in their infancy, right? Only been around for a couple of years. I was kind of curious as far as with MSCA being around in Manitoba, how long has that been, and what's the growth kind of looked like for you over the course of the years that you've been involved?
In our first year of Manitoba School Esports Association, we had roughly 30 to 40 schools that were competing and
And when was that?
20 different. That was 3 years ago.
Okay.
So like in our infancy, so now we're going to be moving into our fourth year. And this past year for our membership alone, we had over 80 schools
Wow.
and 54 school divisions. And I don't know if I said before, there was around 20 school divisions when we started. So it's growing, and senior years is growing. Like a lot of our growth is in middle years,
Mhm.
but those kids now, 3 years now,
Right.
they're hitting high school and they're getting the buzz in there. So, but it takes that person in the school to run the program. And even though I'm a lifelong gamer and I'm not really like a competitive player, I've tried Rocket League, and the kids, when we needed a substitute because one of the kids was sick, I would join the team secretly and we just wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it happened again, I was like, yeah, yeah, I'm ready to come in. The
They're
kids were
like,
like,
"No."
no, Mr. Hildebrandt, it's okay. We'll just play like shorthanded. So that's never been my thing, but like that we try to tell and encourage adults at the school, like you don't need to be interested in gaming. The kids
Right.
are. Like really, you're like a manager, managing a team just like you would for volleyball, basketball, and badminton. And a lot of those coaches, same thing happens. They're like a rookie teacher, or if a void or a spot needs to be filled for an extracurricular, and the principal taps them on the shoulder and says, "Hey, get in there." And they're like, I don't know anything about volleyball. You don't need to. You're just managing really at that point. So
Right.
that's what it is like for us, right? It would be nice if it was someone who was really invested in esports and knew what they were doing. And but again, that's come a long way since when we started 3 years
Right.
ago. Like there
Right.
are opportunities for coaching, and hey, you want to understand Rocket League and how to run a team? Valor Esports offers this free training. Try it out. Yeah, so that's something we're gonna try.
Yeah, I think it's also I can imagine, especially for a teacher. And you mentioned sometimes if you're newer into your career, then all of a sudden taking on this whole new realm that you're having to learn about. I can definitely see where that would be almost like intimidating in a sense, right? So,
For sure. Especially if like a teacher's covering different multiple classes. Like
right.
if they teach 3 or 4 different things in a junior high or a high school setting, like adding something to your plate is always, they're very hesitant because their time is precious. And if they're not really sure what they're doing or understanding what they're doing, and we have teachers join our Discord, that's kind of how we operate our league and our competitions. That's where we post things like scores, match passwords, and you name it. And even that is just sometimes a bit too daunting for someone who's never seen or doesn't know what Discord is.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've been around the scene for a minute, and Discord still throws me a fit. So definitely understand that. So I'm kind of curious though. What is MSEA's mission, and what kind of role do you feel like it plays as far as within the schools itself there in Manitoba?
I think the biggest role, like if you look at our website, we have it all professionally laid out with our mission and our goal is, but with you like boil it down to like what are we trying to achieve, is to provide opportunities for those kids that fall between the cracks.
Hmm.
They're the ones that aren't engaging in traditional sports. They're
Right.
the ones that don't have a place, uh, namely an adult or a place to feel comfortable with in the school, or that adult that they have that connection with. And those are the kids that struggle, and they're the ones that maybe have problems becoming motivated to attend school.
Mhm.
And some of them have never played on a team before. So I think that's where we set out to make the biggest impact in schools. And then for ourselves and growing and offering these leagues, we want to be able to offer multiple genres and formats of video games so that everybody kind of feels that they have a space to connect to. And I think that's the biggest thing that educators and coaches miss, is that I'm going to be doing this from September to May. Like
Right.
that's a huge commitment for them. But when you look at it, it's different seasons, and you're going to get different groups of kids, and they always know what they're doing. The Minecraft kids aren't going to be the ones playing Rocket League. The Super Smash
Right.
kids are going to be playing Brawlhalla. They may not like Rocket League, right? So it's good to offer up some variety.
I think too, as far as you'd kind of hit home for this, a lot of times, and it's not always. I've definitely also seen where sometimes it's juggling sports and the esports program too. But I
Yeah.
feel like for a majority of the students that are involved, it's like this is the only club or like extracurricular that they're involved in. And until this popped up, whether in whatever state I've kind of been around, and it's almost always the same story. It's really cool to see kids be able to have that extra reason to get involved. Because I know for me it was sports growing up, so I don't like, even though I was huge into gaming, like I can't imagine being in a space where there wasn't something like that. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And a lot of parents pay for traditional sports.
Right.
We had a club volleyball player, and he was our best Rocket League player by far. And the same weekend that provincials were was his club volleyball tournament, and his parents told him, "Ah, sorry, you can't play." But he secretly brought his Nintendo Switch and still connected with us on his phone through Microsoft Teams to know like where to join and what to do. So that was kind of cool. He kind of snuck it in while he was on the bench, but he couldn't commit all the time, so they were playing shorthanded once in a while. But yeah, it was pretty interesting the lengths that kids would go to yeah to get in there.
Now, I do think that over the course of the last couple of years, and especially as programs have been around more and they see other kids being there, like you start seeing more of the buy-in from the parents, right? Starting to make the connection
Mhm.
at least where like with esports in specific, where it's like not necessarily just playing a game. I mean, you do build a lot of the same like characteristic traits as like traditional sports, right? Like when you think about like being a part of a team, being coachable, I feel like that's something that parents are starting to come more around to the
Yeah.
longer that it's been around.
For sure. And we're starting to see them understand our events a lot more.
Mhm.
When we've hosted provincials on a weekend and had families there, especially in the middle years group. The parents at first were like, this is really a spectator sport, but I don't really understand what's going on,
Right.
right? But the more that they involve themselves and the kids coming back to them and kind of saying, hey, yeah, we won this match and now we're in this bracket. And that's another thing, tournament structures and things like that. They learn all these things, and that's what parents understand. They've been there, they've seen that. But I think that's one of the main issues for our parents anyway that were attending our events was that I don't really understand what's going on. I see all the technology and computers and screens around, but I don't get it. And until they start to see the final and the outcome
Right.
of things and their own kids explaining to them like the strategy and the logic and stuff that is required in these games to be successful and see that on the screen, then parents kind of come around too.
And I feel like that almost pairs back to like the importance of like for the clubs to be able to like build that space of inclusivity for everyone, right? Because parents who maybe haven't had that experience as well now kind of get to see it, and it starts to click. And I feel like for kids to be able to have that extra support, I can only imagine like trying to tell my parents I was going into esports like 15, 20 years ago. I don't feel like that would have been something that would have gone that's not a conversation that would have gone well. It's nice to see that that's a more acceptable sort of conversation these days, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of parents having kids play at school together in a space, but in person, and that growing that team that way is a lot better than having them play virtual, because that's what the fear is, that these kids are playing in a dark basement,
Right.
isolating themselves. They're not socializing with others. We're turning the lights on in the gaming room and putting them in there together, and they're learning from each other. And if they're all at a same level, like for Rocket League that has like a wide range and skill level, then maybe that's the opportunity for that coach, that teacher to that's practice. We watch some YouTube videos and we figure out how do we get better at this.
And then also being able to, I feel like as schools learn, you can kind of network with other schools and do, I mean, scrims just like you would do practices and stuff. I mean, you really get, so you have so many
Absolutely.
options, and again, it kind of helps keep that extra participation. I feel like from the schools, from the students as far as for the engagement, because it's not just coming. You mentioned it's all year round, whether it's different titles, but it's always at least something different after school. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I was kind of curious as far as your opinion with I guess some of the crossover from the gaming industry as far as where they can go from there, because it's not just about looking to try and go play esports professionally, right? I feel like we start to see where people can kind of take the skills and maybe get interested in like graphic design or working like maybe even in the space of like a social media manager. Do you feel like that's something that you've started seeing more of amongst the students over the last couple of years, or is that still something that has a little bit more, I guess, potential for growth?
I think we all see it as adults and educators. We see the opportunities that could arise. It's
Mhm.
like you said, it's like playing in the NHL, the National Hockey League. One in a million is going to make it
Right.
that far to the big leagues. Exactly the same with esports. And I think with esports, a lot of the good players that are okay for a couple years, they're younger, their skills are honed, and as they get older, you start to lose those skills a little bit, right? So I think maybe those careers are shortened. But yeah, there is definitely a lot of potential, but I don't see that it's growing in schools quite yet. But it's hard to say. I don't know where that data exists. Those kids that are graduating that had competed in esports, what are they doing? Are they going
Right.
into career pathways? But we recently were at Acon, which is like a big anime convention here in Winnipeg. And a lot of the younger kids, like they were not younger kids, sorry, they were like young adults, like in their early 20s, had just graduated, and they were kind of like, where was this when I was in high school? And then we asked them,
Facts
like, what are
though.
you doing? And a lot of them were going into like college, like Red River College here offers, um, they have a game-based learning kind of type of entry level, or where you'd start designing video games or production,
Right.
streaming, like all these things that didn't exist when I graduated, that were opportunities, that are opportunities now. So potentially that is changing. It's just hard to say if our kids are engaging in it, and whether those opportunities are kind of shown to the kids at schools. I know some of our programs have streaming programs, like a Call Googled School has kids that don't play competitive esports. They're in the esports team because they want to stream, which is really
Huh.
cool. And he teaches them tricks and things like that of, if you run out of things to say, oh, 2 minutes left on the clock, they have
Right.
these little phrases to fill in gaps in time and things like that. And I like, they don't have any formal training as streamers. They're just educators trying to get more kids invested in their program. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I also feel like when you kind of think of just as far as so many different interests, as far as for the kids that you see it, I don't know. You kind of mentioned how it's like the 1%. I feel like from what I've seen amongst the kids at different scholastic events, it's not like the competitors back when we were in school. I feel like my basketball team, like 6 people, were like talking about wanting to go pro. And it's like, I don't think 6 kids on the high school team are going pro. Whereas like the esports kids all kind of have the realization that that's not it, but they do have the interest of maybe being able to do one thing or the other. I know you brought up production. I feel like it's such a big like avenue that I've seen more kids taking the advantage of is learning to
Mhm.
broadcast their favorite game, and then they go to school for it. Then all of a sudden they're
Yeah.
broadcasting sports and working with like some of these big networks and stuff. It's a really cool transition to get to see them like walk that path, you know?
Definitely. Yeah. And it's changed so much since we graduated, and from 10, 15 years ago, all these opportunities that exist through esports are, things that viable jobs, employment opportunities that they can take an interest in really young. We haven't, I haven't really seen it. I can't point you in any direction of some data that exists that could prove that yes, this is working. Because like you say, in esports, especially in Canada, it's been around in the States a lot longer, but in Canada, I think Scholastic Esports is in its infancy, and we're still figuring things out.
I guess one thing that I did want to talk about a little bit, Carl, I feel like when with the different events I've already gotten to work with you guys as well as with Canada Esports EDU, one thing that's always like kind of brought up at the beginning of things is like the land acknowledgement. I was curious as far as the importance for you as far as being able to see that like indigenous representation within esports. 'Cause I feel like it's something that seems to be very prominent at all the events that I've gone to so far.
Yeah, I think even within Canada, in different provinces, land acknowledgements aren't as readily used as here in Manitoba, but we do have the fastest growing Anishinaabe Indigenous, what do you call that, population, I guess, in this province and throughout Canada. So it's something that we should be acknowledging, and that this land was belonging to someone else before, and the treaties and things like that. I work with First Nation communities. We will have 13 schools across, like, that really are spread out far and vast across Manitoba. And I go to visit all these schools. And one of the things the programming that I offer the kids is putting on esports competitions. This past year, I decided to bring Lotus 8 along with us because I really felt like they're programming around like the mental state, and that performance mindset within video games was important. But honestly, it's really nice to have somebody other than me um, promoting esports at the school, because they see me all the time, and I'm esports is great. Let's do a tournament, and kids are motivated and excited, and the adults are just like, yeah, whatever. And then I leave, and then we do another one the next year, right? But to have somebody that come in that does this for their employment, for a job, like they're getting paid. This is a paid position for them to come into schools and do this. That they own a professional team. Hey, did you know they're based out of Winnipeg? Did you know
That's
what
cool.
games they play? The kids, yeah, they start to put the pieces together. But I think the biggest thing for the First Nation communities, as you know, because they're so spread out, they're isolated. Infrastructure in our province is terrible, but it's improving. However, Starlink really has helped these communities connect and network with the rest of the province. And again, esports is that outlet for those kids that are craving competition in the school, but they live 12 hours from the nearest town,
Right.
and
That makes
you know
sense.
don't have, like, maybe if they play hockey against another team, it's going to happen once or twice in a school year if they're lucky. And for esports, all they need is an internet connection and a computer that can handle a game like Rocket League or Brawlhalla, and they can connect and play, and they absolutely love it.
And both of those games don't really need much on the back end to be able to
Nope.
run them, which is quite nice. I can say as someone who has some old technology for myself, who still loves to play some Rocket League. Um, I was kind of curious though, kind of looking over the last couple of years as far as the expansion as far as across the board. What do you feel like has been the biggest obstacles that you guys have had to overcome? Is it more on the infrastructure side? Is it more like has it been the funding side, buy-in from the staff? What do you feel like has been like the biggest obstacle?
All three have been pretty big obstacles, but I think this is changing now. In this third year, we've seen a lot of changes. The infrastructure within schools, within our public school system here in Manitoba, there's a lot of IT. Like, a lot of IT is geared that way. They think in black and white,
Right.
and they're that gray areas. They don't exist there because it's that's the idea and the visualization and dreams. That's where dreams are made, that they think in black and white it's going to work or it's not going to work. And now they've been told for the last, let's say, 20 years or more, that no, kids, we don't want them playing video games in school. And now we're telling them, no, we do, we want them
Right.
to play video games as an extracurricular. So some school divisions here have come up with some creative ways to kind of curb that, opening up a gaming network after school ends. That way kids aren't doing it during school. And they really, when the NDP government came into power here in Manitoba, they cracked down on cell phone usage because our neighboring provinces were doing that. So they
Mm.
banned cell phones in schools. But again, all these laws and regulations that, or this very strict enforcement of the cell phone rule has now morphed into these, how is it going to work for our school or our school division and things like that. So we've seen a lot of changes there, but that used to be one of the, I would say, the biggest. But the other two that you name are still, if that's not a problem, then yeah, the buy-in is, or maybe it's the parents in the community that don't want this for their kids. And I mean, just because a group of parents doesn't like it doesn't mean another group may not like it.
Right.
If those kids are fine at school, they don't need any other, activity because they fit in and they have a social group, and that's fine. But those kids that don't have that, this is where that could help.
Do you feel that you've seen at least swing a little bit in the sense of people are also starting to realize it's a way for their kids to be I guess, is that avenue available? I know it is. It's a little bit more accessible in the last 3 to 5 years here in the States of being able to go on with your education and be able to get a little support by playing video games, whether it's a partial
Yeah.
scholarship, full scholarship. Is that something that's becoming more of a realization, I guess, as far as for the students that you see coming through your program as well? Or is that still something that
Um,
it's not so much in the Canadian realm?
no, there are opportunities,
Yeah.
mostly colleges across, again, Alberta and Ontario. They are starting to offer scholarships to play esports, and like you say, you get a little bit of money to help towards that tuition, and you come out of it with a degree, which is really, really cool.
Right.
Just across the border in Grand Forks in North Dakota, they also have a
Oh, yeah,
program.
they're at
And
the expo.
yeah, Matt Knutson is he's got a PhD and he runs part of that program. So he will often come to Winnipeg and put a booth up and kind of educate kids on this. So that's kind of neat. It's sad to say that no, there's no local opportunities here in Winnipeg that kids could do, like to go like typically. I haven't seen it yet that universities have jumped on board on this.
Right.
There are local clubs at, like, University of Manitoba, University of Winnipeg.
But not like a full on like
Yeah,
sponsored team with the university and stuff. I feel like it's definitely a
no,
transition that's still, I wouldn't even say it's full blown in the United States, but it's definitely over the last like 5 years, it's becoming more and more of the norm. I guess I would say I wouldn't be
yeah,
surprised. And I know like St. Clair, I guess that would be
yep,
Ontario, if I'm not mistaken.
Ontario, yep.
Yeah. Their esports program is got a stronghold on NA. I'll tell you what, they just seem to, it doesn't matter the title, they always seem to have a really strong teams. I was curious as far as for through your program, what would, if like someone was looking for probably like your standout moments over the last couple of years, like I mean maybe success stories for like rural or like First Nation schools, like what would be like the one story or two that you would tell?
In York Landing, which is very far northern Manitoba, it's about Thompson would be the closest urban center, is about 8 hours drive from Winnipeg, and then another 2.5 hours is Split Lake. And York Landing is kind of situated in an isolated part where it's a frozen lake, and they're almost like an island where they have to drive over the frozen lake to exit and go into town to Thompson for groceries and things like that. Otherwise, it's a fly-in only. And when the
Really?
ice breaks up, they call it the isolation period, because there is a ferry that could run and they can drive their vehicles on it. But during that ice breakup, there's no travel really, and not a lot of
Hmm.
people can fly, right? They can,
Right.
but I mean they can't afford to. It's quite expensive. So yeah, and then grocery prices go up and things like that. So that happens twice a year in the fall and then again in the spring. We started esports there about 4 years ago now,
Okay.
and that first group that was playing Rocket League, they were doing really well, but they were in the single A division. So the commissioner said, "Hey, these kids are just dominating, and
Gotta move them up.
they're they gotta move them up." And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is like, the first team really of all the First Nation schools that started esports, which is the first team that competed,
Right.
and you know, given their remoteness and stuff like that, I wanted them to succeed. So we said, okay, whatever, bump them up to double A. They kept dominating. They ended up second in the division. They went to provincials and they didn't win. They got second place, but it was just such
Darn good.
a cool, yeah, a cool story for them. But the biggest thing that came out of that is when the commissioner went to input their name, Flying Niska. Niska in Cree means goose, and that's like their mascot from the school. It banned the name because it's spelled Niskak. So I guess it looks like a
Uh,
bad word or something in
right.
English. And the commissioner posted on Twitter, which is now X back then, and said, "Hey, like, what gives?" Whoever the makers of Rocket League are, like, you guys are banning this name, and it's an indigenous name, right? So
Right.
nothing was said, no apology or
Uh,
anything. And then maybe like a month went by, and just for fun, we went back in there and tried to put the name Flying Niska, and lo and behold, it worked.
hey, let's go.
We got one indigenous word working, and that's called truth and reconciliation. That's something that the Canadian government can't even get right. And here these young kids from a remote First Nation community made, every step counts, every small step
Right.
counts. And that may seem like a small step to everybody else, but in that community it was felt like a huge
A
pounding
big
step,
dub. Yeah,
because
for
those
sure.
those kids were given certificates at the graduation
That's
ceremony.
so cool.
The principal went out at length to talk about how great esports was for these kids and motivated them to come to school. And they didn't even know what they had accomplished, right? When we told them, they were just like, okay, whatever. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's what needs to change, like that sense that, oh yeah, okay, the rest of the world doesn't understand Niska because it's a Cree word, but it should. It's like if you're wearing, like, we're both wearing our First Nation esports
Yeah.
jerseys, and we go to an esports function, and the people tell us that, hey, if you want to play as a team in an organized tournament, you can't wear that jersey.
Right.
Sorry, we don't want Eagles at our event or something, right? Like that's got to change. So anyways, the following year I was the keynote at our expo, and I told that story because the Entertainment Software Association of Canada did a case study on it.
Hmm.
It was like a case study from all over, not just education. They looked at medicine and how professionals and educators and everybody's using video games to improve quality of life or something, right? So that was the story that was in there. And then we told it, and that York Landing team that year had sweaters with their logo on it. And I got them all to stand up, and they were white sweaters. Because if you give like a kid from York Landing a jersey like this, they won't wear it. Give them a hoodie. That's
Right.
useful because it's cold up there, right? Year
Yeah.
round,
Right. Right.
and
Right.
they'll feel a lot more comfortable. Yeah. So that was their jersey. So they all stood up and got like a round of applause, and that was a cool moment. The coaches came back and said, "Man, those kids feel like superstars." Well, they are. And it wasn't the same group that competed. It was like a brand new group of kids. But
I love that.
yeah.
I love that. So then what would you say the future looks like for MSCA, and like where is Scholastic Esports heading next 5, 10 years here?
Well, if we keep growing at the rate we have been, we're gonna need to start to think about funding and having paid positions on the board of directors. Because, like me, everybody else on our board of directors is an educator who's a volunteer, volunteering their time, and we have day jobs. We're
Right.
teachers, we're educators, we're
We're
busy,
already overworked.
and right. So finding the time to do these things now has become a massive job. Kind of gauging and or not gauging managing 80 school memberships, like for a finance director that, as an educator, like that, those tasks are becoming unrealistic because it
Right.
takes over their lives. They have kids at home. So we're going to be speaking to the province and some of the ministers, like the Minister of Education and Sport and Culture, to see, how we can start to look at being funded provincially. Is there funds that exist? Because traditionally, if we applied for like a grant with sports and culture and heritage, they they'll come back and say, well, esports isn't technically a real sport,
Right,
so
right.
sorry, you're out of luck. So, and then we look at other grants, they're like, well, you're an association, you're not this type of organization. Okay, so where is that pot? Where are those funds being held? That's what we need to understand. Those are one of the questions we're going to talk to them about, and just kind of show them the growth and the data that we've recorded and our success stories similar to what we're doing today.
So you feel like here in 3, 5 years, the landscape looks completely different, or I mean, what's kind of your goals as far as that, I guess, would be?
I hope the landscape's different. I hope that we can start to pay our volunteers
Yeah.
and maybe, carve out some sort of jobs that stem out of this, and for career pathways for our students that graduate, and maybe we can offer some kind of a, job opportunity for them to run shoutcasting for us, to run graphic design, to help us with managing this association. I hope that it grows and is vastly different than it is now. Because like I say, if it continues to grow at the rate it is, we aren't going to be able to support
Running out of
that. And we don't
resources. Yeah.
want we don't want Play Fly or Play VS or whatever they're called to come in and dominate the scholastic scene. We want to keep it, controlled by educators and run by educators. We charge a small amount of
1000%.
membership. Exactly. And we charge a small amount of membership fee for our schools so that we can run this, but it all goes back to them in the
Right.
form of awards or, live events or whatever. So yeah.
It just doesn't turn into another tournament that's on a server somewhere. And it actually has meaning behind it for sure. So, as far
Yeah.
as for right now, then, what do schools need as far as to get started?
To join in esports,
Yeah. Get involved with you guys at MSEA.
access to a computer lab or maybe some consoles and some monitors in a room. It doesn't take much. We used to tell schools, just get a Nintendo Switch, because basically every game that we play, including Super Smash Brothers, can only be played on the Switch. Um, it's a easy way to compete, and they were relatively cheap. But then lately, before the Nintendo Switch 2 came out, we were kind of saying, well, don't invest in a Switch now because it's pretty old and they're
Right.
going to come out with a new one. But I guess the same is true now. You could get a Switch 2 and play, but we've been advocating for schools to get like PlayStations or Xboxes if they can. And if they're able to, like Winnipeg School Division, they invested into gaming laptops. I think they were roughly about $1,200 Canadian, and they bought 50 of them and then kind of distributed them to schools that had existing esports teams. And again, this year they're going to purchase another set more and try to divvy those out to all the schools so that they can compete. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I guess one last question I would have for you, and I guess it's more of, I suppose, a personal question, would be as far as for you, as with what you do all together within Manitoba with esports, what does it mean to you to be able to facilitate this like type of experience that wasn't available to us 10, 15 years ago, like to these
Yeah.
students now? Because it's a whole new realm that a lot of people haven't been exposed to. And I know you mentioned, gaming is very important to you. Like, what does it mean to you to be able to get to be the facilitator of that experience?
That's a great question because I've never really thought of it that way. I think when I started esports, I was still a classroom teacher in grade 7, and my colleague came up to me and said, "Hey, go check out this website." I went to this session with Melissa Burns, who's the CEO of Esport Canada. She lives locally here and does PD sessions for our MTS PD Day. And he was just so excited about it, but he knew that he couldn't run it himself. And I'd always done like a gaming club. I've always tried to celebrate video games in schools as much as I could. And on a regular basis, every lunch hour, I had 30 kids in that room playing. Basically, we played Super Smash Brothers on different consoles. One time, a kid wanted to play Mike Tyson's Punch Out. That was kind of cool. But yeah, like he was like, if there's anyone at this school who's going to help me with this, it's you. And I was like, I was doing my master's at the time, and I didn't really want to do anything
Take on the
extra.
extra load, right?
Yeah, but I looked at the website. I started thinking about the idea of it, and I guess that's what I needed to make my own idea and vision of it. And then the next day I was like, yeah. And I think we had a week. This was like late January to start Brawlhalla. So we did like an initial sign up, and same thing. 30 kids came to my classroom. Yep, we want to play Brawlhalla. And we were like, we looked at each other like we thought there'd be like 2, 3 kids maybe interested, not like half the population of the grade 7 and grade 8. So it was like, whoa, okay. So we did it virtually. We did it on Microsoft Teams, and that was hard because 30 kids are vying for your attention
Right.
on yeah. So then we started offering it in person at school, and that was a lot better. I guess for me, that's where I got the addiction to esports. That's where I was hooked, because those kids that were taking my French class and in an Anglophone community that didn't see the importance of learning a second language that they were never going to use in their lives. That's how a lot of
Right.
kids treated it. Now these kids were, their marks were improving, their attitude and their behavior toward me as an adult, toward other kids, and just my class in general was improving. Like, who would have thought playing video games would improve their French scores? Because a lot of parents look, that was the one course in the report card, be like, nah, it's okay if you don't do well in that class. We don't care. That's not going to help you anyway, right? So that's where that hook came. So I guess, yeah, in facilitating esports, that's what I hope for, is that kids are more motivated to connect with an adult in their school and maybe have a better experience. I could reflect and tell you about all the great teachers that I had as a kid, but there one really stood out, and it wasn't anything to do with video games. But if I didn't have that connection, I probably wouldn't have wanted to be a teacher.
Right.
If I had bad experience at school, would I want to go to college or university? I'd probably be less likely motivated to do that. And yeah, it's unfortunate that there's probably a lot of people that have that experience. So I guess that's the long answer. And the short of it is, yeah, I'd like to see kids have success and more confidence in themselves,
Well,
build on their self-esteem through esports.
Well, Karl, before we get you on out of here, are there any final words of maybe words of wisdom for people wanting to get into the space, or just things that, like, I guess for somebody who's been in the space the time that you have, that you'd like to kind of, I guess, point out, share with the crowd? Anybody, words of advice for someone wanting to get involved?
Don't be scared if you're not a gamer. Try it out. I think anytime you see kids in a space where they start to shine and they act a little bit differently than you're used to seeing them is worth it, because they're just, like I say, they're going to shine. They're going to engage you in conversation, and whether you're a gamer or not, maybe you'll start to take interest in that piece of it. So I think that's the word of advice: is don't be shy or scared because you don't think that your technical ability or your understanding of video games is good enough. I thought I'm a lifelong gamer, and I thought I knew a lot about video games, but when the kids told me, yeah, we don't want you playing on our team on Rocket League to help us, I understood my place. That I was not proficient enough to play with them and understand that part of it, and that's fine. But I was there to help manage and run the team and tell them, like, hey, what's your next match code and things like that. So that was my job, and I was fine.
I love it. I love it. Well, Karl, I think we've stolen enough of your time on a weekend day. I will let you get back with your family and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I know you're on break as well right now, but we appreciate you letting us take some of your time, talk Scholastic Esports, and we will catch up with you. Well, at least hopefully I'll get to catch up with you here maybe by the end of the semester or sometime, but we appreciate you. All right, boss?
Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. That's also going to do it for us here for this episode of Mind, Body, and Gaming. We hope to catch you back for the next one. Make sure you're leaving those comments down below, helping us share out the podcast episode. Make sure you get involved over on the social medias as well. We appreciate you stopping through. And until we get to catch y'all back for the next one, man, don't forget, with everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere, game hard and love hard. All right, y'all? That's Karl. I'm Q. For the rest of the crew here at Lotus 8 from the front to the back, y'all have a great rest of your week. Peace.